Good afternoon. I am the last one on your list, and I know we are running late, so I'm going to go quickly. I'm going to apologize ahead of time to the translators. I'm sorry, but we'll make it work. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking to you all about the role of research in innovation for development. So I am with the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Collaborative Research on Sorghum and Millet at Kansas State University. It's a very long name, but essentially it is a research program specifically on sorghum and millet, and it is financed by USAID, that is the United States Agency of International Development. Very quickly, I want to tell you a little bit about Feed the Future, which is a part of USAID, so that you can understand the perspective that I am coming from. The Feed the Future Innovation Labs are specifically focused on a variety of different development questions, all agricultural based, many of them crops or commodities or other agricultural products, and they are housed at US universities because they are research focused. And so they really do involve universities from across the United States. Ours is Kansas State, which is located right in the center of the United States. Specifically, our vision in the Sorghum and Millet Innovation Lab is to innovate science to build the crops of the future. And so we really go after this by contributing technologies and knowledge towards the adaptation, the resilience, the improved profitability of the sorghum and millet-based products, and the value chains. So we really try to take a very broad approach to incorporate the value chain in all. Our focus in terms of our target countries really is across the Sahel. So we work specifically in West Africa, two target countries, Senegal and Niger, as well as additional countries of Burkina Faso and Mali. We do also work in Ethiopia and in Haiti, and these countries were specifically selected because of the role that sorghum and millet play from a food security standpoint. It's important to note that the Feed the Future initiative within the US government is a global hunger and food security initiative. So we really are looking, our research is really based on that food security and income security aspect. So we are a 10-year program, 29 million US dollars, and our research covers 3 areas of inquiry. One of those is genetic enhancement, so that includes varietal development, new crop varieties, genetics. The second one is production systems management, so that's where your agronomic questions come in, planting techniques, pest management, etc. And then thirdly, we also look at value addition and market access. So that includes the economics, it includes food processing. So again, we span all the way from the very high level of genetic and genomics down through the consumer questions and value-added products. The absolute most valuable resource that we have in our program are our program partners, and our network expands across the world. We have a number of university and research and government partners within the United States. We also have partners here in Europe, in both Germany and France. But our largest number of partners are our African teams. These include the National Agricultural Research Systems. These include international research programs such as ICRISAT. It includes farmer cooperatives, the private sector, entrepreneurs, regional centers of excellence. And so we have a very broad network, and without a doubt, they are the treasure of everything that we do. So just very quickly, as I was getting this presentation ready last week, I received an email from the USDA, and within it was this particular image, and I thought it was very important. These are the current levels of food insecurity for 2019, and it obviously stood out because the darker the color, the redder it is, the higher the levels of food insecurity. And food insecurity, which is often goes hand in hand with income insecurity, have much broader implications on a global level. Though they are associated with instability. They are associated with broader health problems, with development challenges, stunting, productivity, reduced productivity, and all in all, essentially not being able to fulfill one's full potential due to the constraints of food and income security. And so, from my perspective, this is a subject that should be important to every single one of us in this room because it affects every single one of us. And clearly, much along what we have talked about and some of the things we've seen today, some of the greatest concentrations or the highest levels of food insecurity are on the continent of Africa, which of course aligns with what we are focusing on ourselves. So the question then that I would like for us to ask is, what can research do in these much bigger issues? And what should our research programs be doing to be able to better address some of the issues that we have talked about today? And it all comes back to being more open. We need to reinforce global partnerships. We can have better, more applicable research when we are broadening the partners that we work with, and we bring in the other diversity and expertise by doing that. We need to ensure applied multidisciplinary research priorities. Within the scientific research sphere, sometimes we can be very bad about getting very focused on the one piece that we look at, but the reality is that the problems and the issues that we're trying to address are very multifaceted, and so we need to be sure that we are taking a multifaceted approach. We need to design ground-up driven research projects. That means we need to be working off of the needs of the consumers, the demands of the end users. The questions that need to be asked in research need to be coming from those that have the most to gain from the results of that research. We've got to be dynamic and adaptable to change. Everything is changing every day. Rarely does research ever go as planned. We have to be flexible and be able to adjust to that if we want to be able to attain maximum results and maximum effectiveness. And we've got to seek out open collaboration with our end users. So while the research questions need to come from what they need, they also need to be active parts of the entire research process. They need to be able to give feedback. They need to be able to bring in some of the things that perhaps the researchers themselves can not simply think about on their own. When we talk about research for development, we really see it on a feedback loop. And so what that means is we have these questions of priorities. What solutions should we be looking for through our research? And the priority setting needs to happen at all levels. It needs to be revisited over and over again, and it needs to involve parties at all levels as well, all the way from the researcher to the middleman to the end user. It begins, we can say, with the scientific inquiry and innovation that then develops into solutions. Those may be technological, those may be management practices, and then those solutions can be scaled to the end users for broader application. And during that process, that development process, more questions come up. Prototypes, issues are found with a solution that has been developed, and the process starts again. We've got to research the questions that come up. We have to then try another solution. We then move that out, and then we come back. And it never ends, because that's what progress is. It's constantly coming back and making things better. I'd like to just talk about two examples of this within our program or in association with the Sorghum and Millet Innovation Lab. So we do put a large percentage, approximately 65% of our funding is towards the genetic enhancement side of things. And we have one project in particular that is targeted at West Africa on a regional level, and it's the genetic enhancement of sorghum. This is a 10-year project, and the first 5 years of that project actually did not result in much varietal development. In fact, what it was focused on was building an open network, bringing in the key players from each of the countries that were involved in it, developing an open system of data sharing, developing a process of common measurements so that that data could be shared and so that the results could be more effective. That's now moving into the second phase, and the benefits of this approach are just now becoming clear. And so genetic information is shared from West Africa with other partners around the world, and it is applied, and it continues to be shared in that same feedback loop, and they're able to make progress incredibly quickly. An example that came recently from this was one team of researchers in Togo needing to develop a new variety to meet farmers' needs, and because of research that was already available, they were able to save 2 years in the breeding process, and 2 years is a very long time, particularly when you're talking about issues of food security. Another one that we are a partner in is IAVAO, and IAVAO is another West African breeding network that our particular one, the first breeding network actually is a member of. This was conceptualized here in France at CIRAD, and it is led out of CIRAS, which is a dryland cereals research center located in Senegal. It involves partners from across the region in West Africa, and the idea behind it is essentially sharing genetic information, being able to work together to develop the data and develop what they call the breeding product profiles to more quickly respond to users' needs. That may be farmers, that may be processors. It's whoever is using this at the end. And so this has been extremely successful, and they are now in the process of establishing a database of genomic data within what's called the integrated breeding platform. In terms of data open access, in the United States we have the term open science, and the acronym that really drives that are the principles of FAIR, and it really includes 4 principles. The first one is the data findable? Can individuals locate it? Are you putting it in a place where it can be found? Is it accessible? You might know where it is, but can you get to it? Or is it in a database that does not have open access? Is it in a journal that requires a paid subscription? Is it interoperable? In other words, is the data able to be utilized in another format? Can it be used in a different study? Can it be used in additional research to then make that research that much more effective? And lastly, is it reusable? In its format, can someone take that data and rerun it in a different way and still get what they need out of it? And so those FAIR principles are really key to ensuring that data is utilized for maximum impact. Because the reality is we need the most impact possible from the data that's out there so that we can have more innovation development and better adoption of what is available out there. So very quickly, I'd mentioned earlier an integrated breeding platform. This is what exists currently, the IAVAO breeding network that I just mentioned a moment ago. This is the platform that they actually are a part of. They are now putting all of their data into this platform. So across the entire region of West Africa, they are sharing this data. Everyone has access to it, and everyone is able to utilize it to best advance what they're doing. USAID, the US federal government, also has a policy regarding open data. Anything that is funded by USAID must meet open data policy, which means that everything has to be publicly available once that data has been produced and cleaned. And so the data development library is what they have established for that data, and anyone in this room can access that data at any time. But I think it is also important, as we talk about the importance of openness, we talk about how that's a priority, to also recognize that there are challenges involved with open access to data. And what we see from our perspective of our research program is that there are varying norms and practices around the world, across different countries, across different systems, about willingness to be open. Some are very welcoming of being open with their data, and others are much more protective of it. And so that can be a real challenge, and that's something that as a community we have to continue to work with. Intellectual property rights are a big part of that. It's also important to understand that for researchers, the data that they produce and that intellectual property is also linked to their success as researchers. And so it becomes a very difficult subject that we have to carefully walk through to find the solutions. And then there's also some very important obstacles to accessibility of data. So even if it's out there, it's not always as easily accessible as we might think. And this can be particularly true in developing countries. It can be due to if the data is in a location that requires paid subscriptions to get it, if it requires high levels of connectivity or solid internet connections or the ability to download enormous files. These can all be challenges in certain locations within the world, but especially within the developing world. And so that's where efforts need to be made to figure out how to overcome those obstacles. So the question is for the research community, what happens now? What do we do in the fact that we recognize that open data, or that open access and open science is very important. We have our goals for development, but what do we do? And I think first and foremost, what is happening right now is fantastic. We need to be more directly connected with the private sector, because the reality is research needs to be driving solutions for the end users and for those that need it. And that is what is happening here. All of the solutions that you all are proposing are addressing specifically what they need. There needs to be a priority on sustainable solutions, on those that are not just a solution to get us to tomorrow, but a solution to push success and push thriving years down the road. The investments that are made in research need to be long-term, and they need to be on a feedback loop. The reality is, in the development funding world, there's this tendency to want to have quick projects with quick turnaround. But those particular solutions very often are not what lead us to these sustainable, broader, systemic changes. And so we need to keep those feedback loops, and we need to have those long-term investments. And lastly, in my opinion, there needs to be a much stronger focus on communication. This can be communication across the research community, but also communication throughout the value chain, throughout the various actors, both in all directions. Within the research world, this is one of our greatest weaknesses, in my opinion. But the communication of innovations and the communication of what is working and what is not working in innovations, being able to have that communication and respond to it is key to the adoption of some of these new technologies and new innovations that could really solve some significant problems. So earlier I had shown you this image from USDA on the 2019 food insecurity levels around the world. But what I didn't tell you is actually part of a bigger image. And there's, in addition to the current levels of food insecurity, we have the projected levels of food insecurity for 2029. And I found this to be extremely encouraging, because as you can tell, we expect things will improve. They will improve significantly. There is much less red in that second map. There is an increase in the lighter green, which means lower levels of food insecurity. And that is good news. But perhaps what excites me the most is, as I look around this room and I see the energy and I see the things that are being proposed and the solutions that are out there, I think we can do even better than that. And so really, the future of innovation, the future of the solutions to some of these broader development problems are in your hands. The young, energetic, next generation, this is yours. You have the tools to solve it, and I'm very excited to know that you will.
Thank you very much.